ladies and gentlemen, it's program Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guests today are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
And our man in Kiev, Ivan Kucherenko. Welcome to the show.
Oh. Sound? Oh.
Maybe he decided to re-enter and see if it will happen.
The wonders of the 21st century.
Yeah, that's what we have to live. uh, So in the meantime, Jonathan, there is still negotiations and peace talks all over the
I,
world.
I call it more a contest of political wills.
I don't think that the wills will mean anything anymore because you see, I think Russians became a little bit too greedy. You see, if it's 2 weeks ago approximately, there was a plan that. Okay, there will be a peace. Territories were still not confirmed who is getting what, but okay, so that could have been negotiated maybe at later stage, maybe not. But at least there was a big carrot for Russians is $2 trillion investment plans based on U.S. controlling this uh, Russian money, or so-called stashed in Europe. We're talking about $250 billion. $250 billion. Think about that. And so that would be then multiplied by further investment by Europeans and whoever else, and probably Saudis would put some money, so maybe somebody else, and that will be enough money to take care of reconstruction of Ukraine, helping Russia. Uh, I don't know to do what to acquire even more weapons.
Sasha, it looks good. It looks reasonable to us from our perspective, and we are assuming that the Russians have some sort of similar rationale that in essence we're making partially the same mistake that the Trump administration was initially making in thinking that everyone's willing to make a deal. The Trump administration was mirror imaging, projecting their own world outlook onto the Russians and assuming that surely the Russians, if we offer them a good enough economic deal, they will see reason and stop the war. However, we we have to one extent or another, we have failed to fully recognize the almost practically alien rationality of the Russian leadership, and that they simply do not speak. They simply are not calculating in the same way that we are.
Okay, so practical question, Ivan. Maybe you have an answer to that. So, if the $2 trillion so-called investment fund, all that goes up in smoke because the Russian money are effectively frozen by the European Union. So there is no plan that U.S. could grab this money and get more money and start building these pyramids. So once that is out of question, then what, if any, incentives for Russia do they exist presently, except that if what's happened a couple of months ago when Trump announced that he is thinking about supplying tomahawks to Ukraine, remember what's happened? Russian came to Florida, they flew to Washington, they started to talking and so on. It was so scary situation for them. So the tomahawks, nobody canceled that plan yet. The U.S. still can supply tomahawks to Ukraine, and there could be more sanctions. There could be, and actually, you know what, Ukrainians take such a great care of Russians, including this shadow tanker in the Mediterranean Sea destroyed, and targets in Crimea, and almost anywhere. I don't know if there is any place where Russians can be secured that Ukrainians drones, or even now missiles. Ukrainians missiles are coming of age. So
The Ukrainians are steadily sending the message that no place is safe for you. And so the beatings will continue, the attacks will continue until you decide to stop.
So remember what Russians said, the incentives for Ukrainians to sign a peace is the Russians will promise not to take any more territories. So if Ukrainians will not sign the peace, then Russians will continue on to Kharkiv, to Kiev, Odessa, and then Uzhhorod, and whoever knows what else.
Which at their current rate of advance, as a number of defense analysts are saying, will take about 100 years.
Yeah, that's right, 100 years.
And their economy is going to be exhausted long before then.
So now the Russians' incentives to sign the peace is that Ukrainians will stop their attacks on Russian infrastructure if there will be a peace agreement. How beautiful it is. Ivan, do you have a movie for today, by the way?
Yeah, but first I want to answer your question,
please.
actually. Yes, sorry, I've got some problems with my computer, so I had to restart it, but now I'm back. I've heard that Jonathan said that United States officials encountered a completely alien mindset during the process of negotiations with the Russians, and that's actually the answer on your question. The Russians, especially President Putin, they really enjoy the process of war. Because they don't value human lives at all. It means for them nothing. And when President Trump says that, come on, let's stop this war, let's stop losing more Russian soldiers, let's stop killing Ukrainian civilians, it means nothing for Russians. So what's going on, that they're not interested in any peace deal, and their main goal is to prevent United States, to prevent President Trump from increasing support of Ukraine and increasing sanctions on Russia. Because as Sasha, you've actually said, Russian began to move really quickly after President Trump said that he obviously can supply Tomahawks to Ukraine. And I've got a nice historical movie for today, in order for you just to remember a little bit, and for our viewers to maybe if they don't remember that video, that great woman who is in it, just to understand at last who is Russian president, who is Mr. Putin, and what is important for them and what is not important. So let's start with this video.
Okay, good.
We have the new Mr. Putin. I looked at the pictures of Mr. Putin, trying to look for a trace of humanity. I should, within a few weeks, have known better, because you know what happened. They had the terrible tragedy of the submarine going down, but it was very interesting what happened. If ever there's a calamity in the West, the whole of the armed forces will go, they'll take everything there immediately. The politicians immediately will get together and say, what help do we want? They can have anything we can give. If we haven't got the help, we'll get it from someone else. There would be anxiety, because what mattered was not the submarine, but the lives of those in. And the interesting thing was that the new leader of the Soviet Union didn't act quickly. This was very soon the comment. He didn't try to mobilize everyone else. We didn't know whether we could help, but we were all ready to go and help, and sent some of the small submarines that we had just for such an occasion. But that, my friends, was very, very revealing indeed. They still do not value human life in the same way that we do.
That
Wow,
is excellent.
that's
Right to the
fantastic.
point.
Wow.
And I might add, to supplement your excellent video, the observation that was made in the 19th century by the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. He remarked, "It is well that war is so terrible. Otherwise, we should grow too fond of it."
But Russians
But
are
Russians,
fundamental.
they are fond of it. That is all.
Yeah.
That is very unfortunate. And when my former Russian history professor, Dr. Steven Spironis, who is, by the way, of Greek and Ukrainian ancestry, his mother was Ukrainian and his father was Greek. Now that was an interesting mix, but he remarked during my Soviet history class when I was in college at the University of Tampa, he would remark on more than one occasion. He said, "The Russians are animals." And I thought he was just exaggerating for dramatic effect because I was a college student then and I was just learning about this stuff. And as I read more and more about Russian history and about the wars between Russia and the West and against their own people, I realized that my Russian history professor was not exaggerating one bit. So, yes, your video is of Margaret Thatcher she is right to the point. They do not value human life in the same way that we do. And matter of fact, remember what Joseph Stalin once said. He said that they said, "One death is a tragedy. 1,000,000 deaths is only a statistic."
By the way,
I'm not sure that he said that one that's a
Yeah.
tragedy.
He
Didn't consider the life, the price of human life at all, and during
Yeah.
his reign, they were just
we'll say it
terrible
was
thing.
reputed to. He was reputed to have said that.
Yeah, that happened in Soviet Union with all those dozens of people being killed with Holodomor in Ukraine, when millions of Ukrainians just starved because his government sold all the grain in order to build more and more tanks in his preparing to war with the Western world. So yeah.
see, the problem with Soviet Union and the Russian leadership is they don't believe that the enhancement of human lives to providing better conditions for life is essential for a strong country. That country is strong by so many tanks, and airplanes you build, but to feed their own people and provide better life conditions, it's not essential for a strong country. So this is why Russians are in poverty for almost years. The aim of the leadership was to enhance their own conditions, that's for sure, and to have enough power to start and conquer many more countries. There was just recently one politician in Western Europe, I forgot who, he figured out, I think it was she, how many times in post-Soviet Union times Russia would start any wars or invasions or anything, and she counted almost 40, 39, I think, to be exact. So when Russians say that we never start the war, think about it. It's not true at all. With Ukraine, they started the war in 2014, and then full-scale invasion in 22, and there was invasion of Georgia, and many more. Or they were
and Syria, actually, because when Russia invaded to Georgia, that war was pretty quick, and they actually they've committed atrocities there, but not in such large scales. But in Syria, they've what they've done in Syria with all those bombings of cities, with the chemical weapons attacks, with all their murders, and I think that that time was that Russian commanders understood that they can wage any kind of war and do everything they want in order to achieve their goals, and no one will go against them because Russia is a nuclear power and they can blackmail everyone with
And of
the
course, their support for all terrorist groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, and it's just too numerous, really, even to list all of it. And they're active in Africa. They're active right now. They're meddling into Venezuela, promising their support, and so basically, it's kind of an unbearable situation now that they're opposing the West, U.S. On every continent and every corner. And what Ukraine is doing is just an absolutely amazing thing that really takes all the blood and juices out of Russia with this war. And Russia is not doing anywhere near as everyone would suppose to second army in the world would do, and so on. They're taking Avdiivka for a year. They're taking Bakhmut. They were working for several months before they do. And yeah, the problem is that whenever they're finally taking a city, let's say Bakhmut or Avdiivka, there's nothing left. There are no people. There are no buildings. There's absolutely, it's
It's a
like,
pile of bricks.
yeah,
That's what they were doing. In the World War One, the Germans remarked that both sides were fighting bitterly over every pile of stones and every heap of bricks. That's what the World War One trench warfare became. That is when Eastern Ukraine is becoming, even though the Ukrainians are holding out very well and holding that firm defensive line, which is exhausting the Russian manpower resources. And so it's a contest of political wills, but mathematically, and in what I call the correlation of forces, the Russians are losing, and it is moving steadily in favor of Ukraine. And I am waiting with eager anticipation for the counter move that the majority of Western military analysts do not see or anticipate. They do not see or anticipate Ukraine being able to inflict a decisive counterblow. But as we have been seeing and witnessing over the past several months, really, the air defenses and infrastructure of Crimea is steadily being reduced. You don't do that and not plan for a follow-up punch. If you don't reduce the air defenses and the infrastructure and leave the Russian occupiers essentially helpless without planning for a decisive counterblow, which will free Crimea from Russian control. And that will have a decisive effect on the political situation. My prediction.
John, don't I feel that after each round of peace talks, Russians starting intensify their attacks against cities, civilians, and so on? And I think the message to the West is this: well, okay, yeah, we agree. Sooner or later, the war will be done and over with. Okay. Maybe a year from now, maybe 5 years from now, but one day, yeah, there could be a peace. But you will start to try to rebuild Ukraine. But in the meantime, we're going to inflict such heavy damages that there will be no money in the world enough to rebuild the Ukraine. So this is our message. Okay, take it. You want a peace? Okay, we'll have peace eventually. But your price will be such that you will not be able to afford or deliver it. And I think, is that the nature of the message?
That seems to be a rather grim message, but I reluctantly agree with you that is the essence of the message they are delivering, and that is why I consider this a contest of political wills. It says, okay, you want it bad, you're going to get it bad.
But you know what? I think Ukraine is on the verge of getting so much Western help,
Yes.
and if Tomahawks and other weapons will be delivered, then there will be no more political, it will be typically military contest, and I think Ukraine will take over in that contest.
I think I agree with you on that score, because it's all moving in Ukraine's favor, and Ukraine has successfully adapted and is continuing to build up its defense industry, and they have a high quality, arguably higher quality military force right now in terms of combat experience and skill and innovation. I'd say they're the equal, if not the superior, of most nations in the world. Again, if you argue just military for military, why do you think the United States military is so eager to learn from the Ukrainians? You see, in the United States Army has a lessons learned center. Well, and we have mechanisms for learning from the lessons of history and military conflicts, not just our own conflicts, but from the conflicts of others. We have not to the extent that the Germans used to do wargaming or Kriegspiel, but we do war games. We do war games and studies. And so therefore, the United States is making a conscious effort to learn from the Ukrainians because they are on the cutting edge of military technology and military art. So we are doing well to imitate and learn from their experience. Yeah. So that is it's a strange positive. Okay, you don't look at that. Oh well, the good part is we're learning so much from the Ukrainians. It's unfortunate that we have to do that, but it will be to our benefit, to the benefit of Ukraine, and to the benefit of the West in general, if the United States succeeds in learning from that and successfully applying those lessons to the future development of its military forces.
Well, in the meantime, I have a contact with an old friend of mine from school days who is in Odessa. He's in Odessa right now. His name is Sergei Petrov, and he's a professor of Odessa University. And he's telling me that very often he has 5 kids. Some of them are in the Ukrainian army, some of them are hero, but he is hiding with some of the children in so-called the Odessa Oblast, which means outside of Odessa city, but it's better for example, the electricity is there, more reliable, the water supply and so on. Because in the city of Odessa, the situation is very grim and it's getting actually worse. And Odessa is just one example, because there are many cities which are under siege. And this is unfortunately what's happening. However, I don't know if the situation will continue for much longer, because if peace talks will collapse, and it seems to me that they will collapse any time now, so then US will be forced to do something about it. They cannot say that, well, it didn't work out, we are going away, we are not going to be involved. US is now too involved. There is a lot of political capital on the
You're correct. Yeah. And President Trump does not want to look like a loser.
No.
He does not want to look like a sucker or a fool. He certainly does not want to look like that. And his political history has been internally as well as externally. If you hit him, he'll hit you back harder. That's his response.
That's correct.
He's a counterpuncher. A very good counterpuncher. A very good counterpuncher, as many people are finding out. So,
Jonathan, in reality, his rating is going down now for some time. And it could be temporary. Okay, it can revive, but there must be some reasons for rating to start recovering and going higher. And essentially, if you're looking at his domestic and international foreign policy, you see, okay, he has one big plus, it's immigration. Of course, he's achieved tremendous result right there. Now, concerning the economics, inflation, and foreign policy. It's all iffy.
Yeah.
It's nice that
They-
heroes there. It depends whom you're listening to.
Exactly. And there was one report I saw this morning that revised an economic report for the third quarter of growth last year. They revised it upward. They discovered that our economic growth was faster than had been projected back then. And there are other factors which are kicking in. We have yet to see the cumulative effect of all these tax cuts and deregulation, and some of the measures are similar to what Javier Milei did in Argentina, which has been reflected in Argentina's relatively positive economic developments. And it will be one of the commentators, Newt Gingrich, has said that the full effect of the U.S. economic growth measures will be reflected before next summer. Okay, remains to be seen, but there are some preliminary. We'll see what happens. But that is what they are banking on right now. They are relying on the delayed effect of these economic measures to result in superior economic growth in the first half of 2026. Whether that occurs or not, interesting.
Today, when GDP data was announced, the stock market actually went down on this news. And
that's because it's already been factored in. So, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
What other remember, the stock market anticipates. It anticipates what it often when you see a decline, that means that the good news has already been factored in in the reaction of investors is, okay, what else good news? What is there more good news that we didn't anticipate? Oh well, in which case some investors take the profits.
Jonathan, there is more alarming thing to it. Is that most of this increased GDP is spending by artificial intelligence and companies like NVIDIA. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions. So the real economy, the Main Street, in fact, is not doing that well at all. It's all those giant AI companies, they are doing tremendously well. So how that will be dealt with and
that's a real tricky one to predict because otherwise this show is going to turn into the economics show.
That's already there.
It's the Ukraine show. Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian war effort, Ukraine kicking the Russians' butt.
Actually, I wouldn't be surprised that Ukrainian GDP will start improving very shortly because of this all this new production of drones, missiles, and so on. It's all economy too. It's all economy.
Yeah, remember, and just as happening in Ukraine on this scale is a smaller scale version of what happened with the United States during World War II, when it went total immobilization and became the world's largest war machine in recorded human history. And you had virtually full employment in the United States back then because it was literally lifting the United States out of the Great Depression. So fortunately they were able to successfully readapt that war machine into domestic consumer production after the war when they had to demobilize. So that is the difference. Right now, Ukraine will benefit. The Ukrainian people will benefit from this increased war production and other things, and if they also get the infusion of all those Russian assets which have been frozen, and which, if they can be successfully recommitted to Ukrainian recovery and development, that will be to the long-term benefit of Ukraine. And in spite of the Russian strategy of attacking civilians and civilian infrastructure and going on those human safaris that Ivan showed us the video of in a previous program, that is a reflection of the failed nature of Russian strategy. They are doing the same thing that the Nazis did against Great Britain during World War II, when their air attack in the Battle of Britain failed to force the British to surrender, it failed to achieve air superiority over Great Britain's beaches. in order to execute Operation Sea Lion. When those things failed, essentially the Germans fell back on terror attacks, bombing of London, night attacks. Because the night attacks, they could not successfully attack Great Britain during the day, particularly as the United States built up its defenses and its air forces on Great Britain. So right now, all these things are an echo of what happened during World War II. The Ukraine will continue to develop its air defenses, will continue to reduce those of Crimea, and eventually there will be a counterpunch.
Yeah, John, don't you see there is a great difference between societies, between people? For example, if you take UK and France, UK easily capitulated to Germany, although they had pretty good army, at least Continental Army, but they just collapsed. Germany just took over so easily, where it didn't work out for them well in UK. Because England just fight it until they turned out the way the war was going for them, with, of course, with help from the US, with the Russian resistance at that time. And so today, I must tell you, Ukraine, in my opinion, is the only country in Europe that could withstand such a horrible attacks from Russians. The second, maybe Poland could be the second country that could withstand Russian attacks. Now, on the West, it's hard to say because nobody in the West wants really to fight. Maybe Germans will fight, but hopefully it will not be there for us to try to use the wisdom of that. Hopefully the war will be over much sooner than Russians will start thinking about attacking other countries. And while Ukraine is there and resisting or arranging for peace, either way, right now, for a long time, I feel quite secure about Ukrainian future. I can see now that militarily Russia will not be able to do anything with Ukraine. And as a peace, the longer Russians fight, the better peace arrangements for Ukraine will see. And there could be.
I think you're right on that score, because the longer the Russians insist on prosecuting a military unsuccessful war, the longer it will take for them to recover and rebuild, because they're going to have to do it, no question. They are taking staggering losses, and their losses are only increasing relative to those of Ukraine. So now it's just a question of when they finally decide to, what I say, declare victory and go home. When they finally do that, then all we have to do is simply maintain our resolution to rebuild Ukraine, give those assets to them, help encourage the Ukrainians who have fled the country to come back and say, okay, now we've stopped the war, we're helping to rebuild Ukraine. Won't you please come back to your homeland and help Ukraine become stronger again?
Of course they will. And so far, the score for Russians is 1,200,000. Think about it. Which, if there is any country that lost in post-Second World time so many people, 1,200,000. I can't even think of anything. Maybe
you mean during World War II? I mean, the Germans. Oh, after World War II. Up until this point, the Russians have lost the most people of any country in any war. After World War II, World War II, they took first place. They now also have second place in terms of the number of people they've lost. So I agree with the economic dislocation, the demographic dislocation, the problems they're going to have with their birth rate, with population growth. There's a host of problems they are going to be suffering from for the remainder of
implications, political too. Just see if some kind of peace agreement sooner or later will sign, you will see what will happen to the There will be a lot of questions asked. Vladimir broke 200,000 people. What did you get? What? What did you get?
Remember what I said in the previous program? How there is a war game industry, a commercial war game industry in the United States, for example, and in some other countries, where they design and make war games of all sorts of military conflicts in history, as well as a few hypothetical conflicts. I predict, and as surely as God made little green apples, there are war game companies in the United States that are watching this conflict very carefully, and in the coming years, probably before the midway point of the 21st century, there will be commercial war games being sold on the Russian-Ukrainian war, all aspects of it, and there will be teenagers. There will be teenagers and young adults playing this war game on their own as a war, trying to learn lessons from it. And of course, it's going to be one of those things where, my God, why did they even think of starting this war? Well, actually, it was Russia that thought of starting this war, and you see the costs of it. And you will see people actually treated just as you have hobbyists who play past military wars of World War II, the Civil War. You will have people playing this as a game before the middle of the 21st century.
Remember, recently Putin said, I think last week, that he doesn't feel responsible for so many lives lost in this war because he is not one who started the war. It's Ukrainians who started the war. Europeans started, the NATO started.
That is the supreme example of refusing to accept responsibility for your own actions.
Well, obviously, there are investigations now that Putin is not normal person anymore, and he lives in some kind of a shell, and he's limiting his contacts with his commanders and so on. It's becoming quite grim situation.
That sounds very similar to what happened during World War II with Adolf Hitler. He became increasingly isolated as World War II began turning against him. He became increasingly isolated. He trusted very few people, and he increasingly lived in his own world. And the rest of the world had to pay the price for his fantasy.
But there were many attempts live, several attempts, and there is none for Putin. Or maybe it's going to happen anytime soon. We'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully
we can only hope.
Hopefully that will lead to a lasting peace for Ukraine.
Yeah, just be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. Gentlemen, thank you very much for today's program. We'll have on Friday repeat, and next Tuesday, a week from now, we'll have the final program for this year. And,
excellent.
Yeah, we'll talk about anything what's happened at that time, and it will be very interesting what news during this week we'll be able to discuss.
I have no doubt.
Slava to Ukraine.
God bless America.
And glory to America and Canada
and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. There's a good. I was waiting for someone to chime in with that. Good for you, Ivan.
Yes, and Happy New Year we'll announce next Tuesday. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.